What's up guys, short video today. I'm going to be answering a very common question I get from the riders that I coach, and it's about whether they should use a heart rate monitor with their power meter. All the riders I coach use power meters, and quite often they ask, do I need to wear my heart rate strap? Should I dust it off, an old one they've got, or should they go out and buy one? As a coach, it would be very tempting for me to say, oh, it's great, it gives me all this good data, it's really important to use, and sort of talk myself up. But just to be honest, I don't use heart rate data with my riders that much. I don't find it that useful when you've got a power meter. In saying that, there are 3 ways that I think the average rider can use heart rate with their power data to give more insights. As with most of my videos, I would rather show you than tell you. So we're going to jump over to today's plan in Strava, and I'm going to give you some real life examples from my own training and racing. First way heart rate can be used with power is by giving you a more realistic measure of your effort level when exercising in the heat. As most of you know, when you're exercising in the heat, your heart rate increases, and usually your power output will also decrease. So I've got an example here, the Australian National Time Trial Champs in 2017 and 2018. Firstly, looking at 2017, very hot day, average temperature 35 degrees Celsius. My threshold power at the time was probably 370, 380 watts. And in this time trial for the hour, I did 344 normalized power. So probably 25, 30 watts down on my threshold. Pretend I didn't have heart rate here. If I was looking at and trying to analyze this ride, I'd be like, okay, 344 watts normalized. So I'm about 30 watts down. What went wrong? Oh, well, it was a bit hot, but so maybe it was the heat. Oh, but maybe I did my taper wrong. Maybe I didn't push hard enough. There's a whole bunch of things you would go through. But with heart rate data, I can come in here and then straight away, within 10 seconds, I can see, okay, within 4 minutes into the time trial, I had my heart rate up at 188 beats per minute. Not used to the heat. Didn't do my heat acclimation work. Without heart rate data, it can be a little bit harder to figure out what went on because you don't know how your body was responding to produce that power output. So especially in the heat, heart rate data is a good guide to effort level. So I can come in and say this. I said, I averaged 188 beats per minute for an hour. Clearly it wasn't a lack of effort. Case closed, go and work on it again for the next year. And I did that, quick example. So in 2018, let's go back and have a look at the photos for a bit of nostalgia. Back in 2018, Mobius Bridge Lane. Got the old, I think these were BioRacer overshoes, the Silver Surfers. Focus Chrono, cables exposed, C75 front wheel, Quare skin suit, Giro Airhead. Not a bad setup. Position looks okay. Standard bottle, which isn't great. Anyway, we're not here to analyze this. Let's look at this. So remember the last one, 2017, it was 188 average heart rate. This time trial was 186, so 2 beats lower. Similar temperature, so 34 degrees, but power output 362 normalized. So still probably 20 watts down on my threshold, but overall, a better effort. Heart rate still elevated, so probably still some work to do in terms of heat acclimation. But without heart rate, then it just makes your detective work trying to figure out what went on a lot harder. Second way you can use heart rate is to monitor the effectiveness of your taper. Big target for me in 2017 was the road bike time trial in the Tour of the Great South Coast, the National Road Series race. So the prologue time trial, I did it in 11 minutes and about 30 seconds. And I'd done a lot of good training this, hitting really good power in training. I thought I was going to at least podium this. It was, I was on for a good one. So let's do a bit of detective work to let you know how I was going into it. So if I go into, it was in 2017, if I go into my peak power table, and let's see, in the month before this time trial, I was doing specific efforts for this. I was doing really good power. Like we've got here, my peak 10-minute power in the month going into this time trial before was 456 watts for 10 minutes. That's big power. And I did that on the 17th of August. And the race was on the, what's the date here? 25th of August. So this was about a week prior. I had done 456 watts for 10 minutes. So you can understand why I went in thinking I was going to podium it. But then we go, let's have a look. What did I do on the day? So I'm going in there. So remember that 456 watts for 10 minutes. I'm thinking I'm on for a good one. I go out on the day. I have a shocker, just a shit one, real slow. And I did a lot of hard training, a lot of really hard efforts for this. And I came out and had a shit one. And I went to look into it. So I'm like, okay, let's have a look. 11 minutes, 34 seconds, 423 watts. Like, what? That's like, I did 30 watts more than that the week before in training. So just a terrible day. Now, for me to figure out what went wrong with this would be very difficult without heart rate data, but I'm going to toggle on the heart rate and see what happened. Was my heart rate too low and I was too fatigued? Was it hot? Things like that. So it wasn't hot. It was it was actually kind of cold morning. Let's bring up the temperature as well. Temperature, what have we got here? So it's like 20 degrees going down to 15 degrees. So heat, not a factor, but heart rate, we're at 190 BPM here. And how far in is this? This is two minutes into the time trial. I'm at 190 beats per minute. You're in for a shocker there. So massive heart rate response at the start of this time trial. Why is that? Well, if I close out of it, usually when your heart rate's very overly responsive, it's because you're too fresh. So if I go to this time trial here, I can say, okay, the day before I didn't ride. Now, you can't always do that because these NRS races, you're driving up, it was in Victoria. So I didn't manage to ride the day before, which is not ideal. And then what was my load going into it? So we go the TSB end of the day before, positive 10. And if you watch my other video on training load, I like to go into races more fatigued, more like -5, -10. And I was going in with 10. So for me, case closed. I didn't get to do a pre-ride the day before, and I was going in way too fresh, so I got a massive heart rate spike at the start. So without heart rate though, there's so many other things I could have been looking into, trying to figure out what went wrong. So heart rate, really useful in that case. So final one, and I almost didn't include this because it's a bit wishy-washy and not too solid, but I'll explain it anyway. It can be useful for measuring your improvement at lower intensities. So let's say you're doing your endurance rides. Case in point for myself, back in, when was this? I think it was back in May. So actually a bit earlier. So back in February. So we've got the two rides I'm going to bear here, both 3-hour endurance rides. 17th of February, which is right coming out of teen camp when I hadn't done much training, right at the start of my training block. 4 weeks later, a month later, I did another 3-hour endurance. And let's compare the rides and show you how I'm looking at heart rate here. So both rides, let's look at them. This was just a steady endurance ride. So the whole ride here, average power 226 watts, normalized power 232. That was at the start. 4 weeks later, essentially the same ride, 227 average, 237 normalized. So within, the normalized power was 5 watts different, so pretty similar. And you can see like these look, even just looking at the graph, very, very similar. I could look at effort level. Like I would be hoping that the effort level in the one I did 4 weeks later at the same power, it felt easier. That would show improvement. But that's a bit subjective and it can feel hard. It can be hard to look back on things and because you can't always remember how hard the session was. But if I compare heart rate, this is where I can get a good insight to show that I've gotten fitter. In the one I did at the start of the training block, my average heart rate was 148. 4 weeks later, my average heart rate was 138 and I did 5 watts more normalized power. So I've dropped 10 watts off my heart rate and increased the power 5 watts normalized. The reason why I'm not too keen on this is there's a lot of other things that could have contributed to that. I could have been more fatigued in the later one, which means when you're more fatigued, it suppresses your heart rate. It could have been cooler. So this one was average 22 degrees. The other one was average 18. Okay, so temperature didn't come into it too much, but temperature can affect it. There's probably other things that could affect it, but they're the two main ones, the temperature and also your fatigue that will affect heart rate. So keep that in mind, but that's a general one. If you're looking at your endurance rides, it can be interesting. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't really make any changes to training on this. This is more something that's just interesting to look at. So I will tell my riders, look, I'm not going to adjust too much based on your heart rate, but it can be interesting for you to see how your heart rate changes at the same power output and also relative to your effort level. So that's the third one there. So just to summarize there, overall heart rate not necessary in my opinion, not overly useful, but it can be interesting to look at. And those are the 3 ways that I would recommend you use it. Thanks for watching this video and I'll catch you in the next one.